Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tune in, Minnesota tonight. Tonight. Minnesota tonight. Tonight. Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Yeah. I'll probably take those.
And this is the state of Minnesota.
The Minnesota Department of Employment has released the 2015 Guide to Starting a Business in Minnesota. The guide is 1 page long and reads as follows. Step 1, start a brewery. Step 2, refer to Step 1.
After a year of revealed closed dates, Nye's Polynese Room has scheduled a final closing day, this April 3rd. Tickets are now available for their Halloween show.
Kemp's released a green vanilla-flavored milk commemorating the Green Bay Packers' recent playoff run. When reached for comment, the guy that created green ketchup said, "Oh, so when it's milk, it's cool."
Okay.
Richard Mann, a 101-year-old St. Paul resident, was seen shoveling his neighbor's driveway last weekend. When reached for comment, the neighbor said, "I was getting to it."
The Vikings have purchased land in Eagan to build their new headquarters, including a hotel, offices, retail space, and another football stadium, because clearly they needed the space for new trophies.
Mm-hmm. It's a long game they're playing.
Yeah.
The Twin Cities... The Twin Cities Model Railroad Museum has moved from Bandana Square in St. Paul to near the old Amtrak depot in St. Paul, to avoid high rent charged by the robber barons who own Bandana Square and all the rails this west of St. Louis. Yeehaw. The Walker Art Museum has released plans for the reopening of its sculpture garden, most prominently featuring a giant blue rooster that will stand over 20 feet tall. A Walker official has been quoted as saying, "Don't worry, guys, we've got some weird stuff coming too."
All right, Cody, that was good. That was a good Walker joke, but I think I can do this a little bit better.
Please.
The Walker has released plans for the reopening of its sculpture garden, most predominantly featuring a giant blue rooster that will stand over 20 feet tall. It's going to be named Babe, the Big Blue Cock.
Okay, yeah, enthusiastic, immature some might say, but yeah. Okay, I'll try it one more time. The Walker Art Museum has released plans for the reopening of its sculpture garden, most prominently featuring a giant blue rooster that will stand over 20 feet tall. It was originally planned to stand in downtown London. After it was labeled by London officials as a hideous mutant farm beast, Walker executives said, "Do you just have the one?"
Okay, that was okay, haha. But I think I can do just one more.
Yeah, please.
All right. So the Walker has released plans for reopening its sculpture garden, most predominantly featuring a giant blue rooster that will stand over 20 feet tall. Okay, I'm not gonna tell a cock joke. I'm fine. It's low-hanging fruit. Haha. All right. So nothing like staring at a giant blue cock, right? God damn it.
So the AARP labeled Minneapolis as the first age-friendly city in Minnesota, citing access to affordable food and respect for seniors. When reached for comment, Minneapolis seniors said, "Are you still dating that Courtney girl? She always seemed like a bit of a whore."
Minnesota officials say they are confident that lead poisoning will not be a threat to Minnesota state water. So suck it, Michigan's governor, whatever his name is. We've got lakes and lakes of water, son. God, that feels good. God, I've never been thirsty in my life.
You finally got it out of your system.
Yeah,
It's been bottled up for a while.
God.
Residents of northeast Minneapolis are posing frozen jeans to look like the jeans are standing on their own, creating sculptures of people-less pants on their front lawns. In other news, trending outside in northeast Minneapolis right now, a lot of cold, shirtless ghosts. 1,650 counterfeit hoverboards were confiscated at the Minnesota-Canadian border last weekend. Meanwhile, a 15-year-old named Trey somewhere just received a text saying, "They got the stash."
An Edina man built a giant snowball out of frozen towels last week. Local media publications planned to interview the man, but decided against it because who wants to hear about a guy so lonely he'd do that?
And finally, ridership on the Blue Line light rail increased by about 12% in 2015. It would have been 13%, but people really love getting hit by that thing.
All right, and that was the state of Minnesota.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Minnesota tonight.
Tonight, we'll take 10 to talk about Islamophobia, Donald Trump's safe word. Islamophobia is the fear of Muslims, Islam, and basic logic. Like all other prejudices, it stems from ignorance, misunderstanding, and Fox News. Let's take a look.
These people live to kill us, they live to attack us, they live to horrify us, and when people pull back, that's exactly what they want.
And therefore, I think that we ought to be very selective in allowing any Muslim or future Chinese students in here.
Hans and Sven are not on the FBI's most wanted list.
So they looked at the Quran and said, grab a meat cleaver and hack somebody up? Fantastic.
I think it's time for profiling, though, don't you, Ange? I think it's time for profiling because the profile has been Middle Eastern Muslims who have blown people up or attempted to blow people up over the last 15 years.
Let me make it clear. I don't have a problem with profiling. I think Pete King, the congressman who's the head of the House Terror Subcommittee, when he talks about that the police have to get in and infiltrate the Muslim community, I completely agree with that.
I think that we should be able to put in listening devices in there. Is that possible? No.
No Muslim students coming here with visas. No more mosques being built here until you stand up and denounce what's happened in the name of your prophet.
They're openly telling us they want to take over the country. They're openly committing treason. They're openly Islamifying areas. And it has to end. And that's what we're saying. It's like you don't keep adding to the problem.
Well,
but, yeah.
Well, Tommy, we got your back, and we'll definitely look to keep in touch. And I really think it's it's great what you're doing.
If we burn down your mosque here, you'd be really upset.
So, we didn't write this, but can we just take a moment? What the hell is future Chinese? Are we profiling Chinese people 100 years in the future? They're coming back to terrorize Americans? Okay, I just wanted to make that note clear before we continue. So, as you can see, the entire programming of Fox News is devoted to converting viewers from open-minded human beings to an army of paranoid conspiracy theorist chihuahuas that constantly shiver in fear of Sharia law being imposed in Grand Marais. Anti-Muslim rhetoric is becoming increasingly common and intense across the United States, and Minnesota is no exception. It's easy to be Islamophobic and almost required if you're a Republican running for office. Meanwhile, if Starbucks changes a coffee cup, Christian groups hold a vigil and start considering caribou as an alternative. And while Christians may see the phrase "happy holidays" as a hate crime, Muslims in Minnesota know all too well what a real hate crime looks like. Nowhere is this more clear than in St. Cloud, one of Minnesota's diversest cities, where residents include Lutherans and Catholics. Yet since 2000, East African communities in the city have grown rapidly, and many of the white residents are not so happy about this. Bullying and discrimination against Muslim students in St. Cloud public high schools has become so intense that the Federal Department of Education has sent in members of the Civil Rights Division to investigate, which sounds, honestly, like the saddest sequel to 21 Jump Street ever created. In the investigation, Somali students reported that they had been spat on, mocked, accused of being in ISIS, and threatened by students. One student was even thrown down a flight of stairs by members of the football team. The worst part of this is that these bullies grew up watching Arthur. Let that sink in for a second. Arthur, an after-school special starring an aardvark turned bear with a rabbit best friend, couldn't teach tolerance. What will teach tolerance if that can't? Unfortunately, a four-eyed, snub-nosed bear cartoon would probably receive better treatment in St. Cloud's public schools than this human being who happens to be Muslim. But if we want to stop bullying in St. Cloud schools, we should probably ask St. Cloud adults to do so first. Within the last couple of years, adults in St. Cloud have poured pig intestines and human shit on Somali-owned businesses. I don't know what's sadder, that they just had a bunch of pig intestines hanging out in the fridge, or that they chose to use those pig intestines for evil. And this is not just happening in St. Cloud. This past week, a Minnesota man and frontman of a Sugar Ray cover band, Matthew William Gust, was arrested for firebombing a Somali-owned cafe in Grand Forks, North Dakota. A few days earlier, that same cafe was vandalized with spray-painted swastikas and a warning to, quote, go home. So far, the Grand Forks Police Department has called these incidents unrelated. Really? Unrelated? I mean, what kind of detectives are you? I would hate to watch your Law and Order episode. What do you think, Bob? These events are unrelated. These events are related? Oh, I don't know. Well, probably. I mean, it's a big city, and there's no way to tell. End of the episode. Now, this has all happened in a state that has long prided itself on welcoming outsiders because, let's face it, we need the warmth. Yet, beneath the lily-white snow lies a history of fear and aggression towards Minnesotans considered to be un-American. Over the years, the definition of un-American has included Native Americans, African Americans, the Irish, the Germans, the Polish, the Jews, the Dutch, the Hmong, the Cylons, Smurfs, and even the Finnish. That's right, the Finnish. The only thing the Finnish are known for are great dental care and excellent public schools, yet they're known as un-American. Well, that makes sense, because nothing is more un-American than having your shit together as a country. That's right, just 100 years ago, many Minnesotans feared and despised the Finnish. The sentiment was so strong that in 1918, a young Finnish-American man was tarred, feathered, and lynched in Duluth, Minnesota. This was also the case in Minneapolis. Up until the 1940s, the city was known as the most anti-Semitic city in the country. And let's just take a moment to remember who our competition was. For several decades, Minneapolis businesses and organizations and even entire neighborhoods barred Jews. Jews couldn't even get a AAA membership in Minneapolis, which is ridiculous because you don't even need a car to get a AAA membership. For a Minneapolis AAA membership, you needed two things. One, you need a heartbeat. Two, you need foreskin. Look, almost every ethnic group in America has been deemed un-American at some point. So, welcome to the club, Muslim Americans. Pretty soon you'll be able to discriminate against other ethnic groups just like Finnish Americans. Because that's the true American dream, to one day be accepted enough to discriminate. And as far as that may seem away, there are signs that this day may come. Thanks to Minnesota Congressman Keith Ellison and District Attorney Anthony Lugar, Governor Mark Dayton, the three of which combine to make the hardest game of government fuck, marry, kill. Because let's face it, they're all marriage material. Guys, let's take Congressman Keith Ellison. He's the nation's first Muslim American elected to Congress, and he's been a prominent leader when it comes to Muslim American rights in Minnesota. Time after time, Ellison has communicated the necessity of a diverse state. He's like our political Fonz. He's always punching jukeboxes, sliding beers down to the guy at the end of the bar, protecting the rights of religious and ethnic minorities, and you damn well know his hair looks perfect today. Ellison recently made news for helping start a petition to ban Donald Trump from St. Paul, which many people thought jumped the shark, but I actually really liked it. District Attorney Anthony Lugar, on the other hand, Minnesota native and judicial sex icon, has become strongly involved with Ellison and the Muslim American rights movement. Using his authority and insight and smoky brown eyes, Lugar helped open a new mosque in St. Anthony after 2 years of legal dispute. And the third ray of sunshine, and probably the one I would most like to marry, is Governor Mark Dayton. And come on, just look at that face. When over 20 other state governors announced that they would stop Syrian refugees from entering their states, Governor Dayton had this to say.
This is Minnesota, and you have every right to be here. And anybody who can't accept your right to be here, and that this is Minnesota, should find another state. It really should go somewhere else.
Immediately following this statement, liberal arts majors across the state and a certain satirical show host began to throw underwear at the gubernatorial equivalent of Steven Tyler. These elected officials make me proud to live in Minnesota, but we should not get too proud of just not being assholes. We should actively work to make sure that our state becomes a place that everyone, regardless of their background, can call home and get a damn AAA membership. Thanks. Good night, Minnesota.
Minnesota tonight. Yeah.
welcome. We are here with Tamim Saidi, board member of the Islamic Resource Group of Minnesota. Also, pharmacist, correct. Thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about Islamophobia. So as both you are a practicing Muslim, correct, and a pharmacist, have you discovered a pill or something that you can give people so like they would not do that at all? Just like Islamophobia away or something?
Right, like anti-Islamophobia. Well, I think it's called getting to know a Muslim personally.
Oh,
if you know a Muslim personally, I think that would cure most of your diseases, right?
Exactly. Wow.
So I think that's really true. Is that when they did the studies, where they looked at the people who actually knew a Muslim personally as part of their coworkers, friends, neighbors, or somebody they knew, they had much lower levels of bigotry than somebody only knew Muslims from the TV. So I think that is definitely the cure. So if you can find one, that's the cure for it.
Right. Okay. You don't want to search too hard. You don't want to be creepy about it.
You don't want to make it hard.
Right. Exactly. So you have lived in Minnesota since 1990. Excellent. And so when over the years, over the 20 some odd years that you've been here, have you seen a difference in the way that the Muslim community has been treated at all, or a rise recently in like Islamophobic sentiment?
Yeah, I think definitely it was much more difficult right after September 11, 2001. For those about a year or so, it was very difficult. And actually the levels came down. But this last year, 2015, has been one of the most difficult years for American Muslims. The one reason, of course, being we have a crazy group called ISIS, which if you look at when Al-Qaeda considers ISIS to be psycho, you can tell how psycho they really are, right? So Al-Qaeda leader calls them that this group is a psycho group, watch out for them. So you can tell really how psycho they are. The second thing is that we are in an election season, which there are certain candidates, which I'm sure you all know who they are.
I don't know any of them.
You need to watch some of the cable shows. I think you'll tell you quite a bit about
I watched a minute of it earlier, and my eyes bled a little bit, so I try not to.
That's not a bad thing. But anyway, so I think that is also, there are certain candidates who try to gain some more votes from certain segments of the society, which I think is a very tiny minority, but nonetheless they try to fan the flame of bigotry and prejudice and hatred, which has been happened to other Americans before Muslims. So I think that's exactly what's going on.
Right, and I think that's like a really good point to make, that it's like a small minority that is being fanning these flames. But what does it mean for the Muslim community when you say 2015 was a hard year for the Muslim community, both in America in its entirety, but also in Minnesota? What does that mean in the lives of the Muslim?
Well, I think it means that a lot of kids were being bullied in public schools. I think St. Cloud is definitely one of them. Other places, people are being called ISIS and they're called terrorists and so on. Some of the women were feeling intimidated to go outside when they're wearing a hijab or wearing a scarf, which is, interestingly enough, the way that Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, peace be upon him, dressed. All the pictures of Virgin Mary that I have seen, she's always wearing a scarf and loose-fitting clothing. So a lot of Muslim women have felt intimidated to go out with a hijab, with a scarf to go out. There's been a lot of name-calling, and there's some incidences in St. Cloud. There was something here not too far from here in Coon Rapids that there was a Muslim lady in one of the Applebee's that somebody, when she was speaking her native tongue with her family, and somebody came and smashed a beer mug on her face. She actually got a cut. She had to go to the ER. And of course, there was some charges about that. So there's been a lot of stuff like that going on, which the Muslim communities definitely feeling the tension for this.
Wow.
So it's been difficult for sure.
And so how does the Muslim community, when it's, the fear is palpable within the community and the rhetoric from the other groups and other small minorities, but that are clearly anti-Muslim, how does the Muslim community, in your experience, respond to that kind of?
Well, I think that response is diverse. Some people actually have gone in hiding. They try not to go out very much, not to show that they're Muslims, but some people are more vocal. They're speaking out more, they're inviting more their neighbors. Actually, what we have had is really an amazing response from our local neighborhood churches and different synagogues and associations. They have been inviting us to come and talk about Islam. What is Islam? Who are the Muslims? What do we need to know? How can we help you? So I think most of us are not only feeling that hate and prejudice from a very small segment of the society, but also the Minnesota nice, the Minnesota love from the, in the cold of Minnesota, we feel the heat of warmth from the hearts of our fellow Minnesotans and Americans, which is a great feeling.
It's a great feeling. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we talked about none of that earlier. We made it seem like it was a hellhole.
No, I think we definitely had some really positive. I mean, the governor has been great, the congressman has been great, the mayor of Minneapolis, St. Paul, the city councils, a lot of wonderful things happening in Minnesota. But nonetheless, also the other side gets quite a bit of media as well. So I think we have to keep that in mind.
And so, what would you say is like the best thing that someone who is not part of the Muslim community can do to combat Islamophobia, or combat, at least make you feel more comfortable as living in your daily lives in this state?
Great. Great question. So some of the things that they can do, like what our local churches did, if you're part of either a religious organization or civic organization, email me, invite somebody from your local neighborhood, a Muslim, to come and speak about Islam, tell you who they are, what they are. I think it's really important to make sure to treat each other as humans and not to dehumanize each other. I think when that happens, that becomes really one of the worst things that happens. At the end, these people are those other people. So we have to make sure to get to know each other as friends and neighbors and as fellow human beings and fellow Americans and fellow Minnesotans. I think that is one of the biggest things. The second thing is to get to know each other, and also to realize that a lot of times things happen that we hear about them in the media, but also there was actually a meme going on Facebook that actually shows a picture of KKK, and it says, just like these people, a picture of KKK on top, a picture of ISIS on the bottom. It says, just like these people are not representative of Christianity, these people are not representative of Islam. And I think that's true, because they're a tiny minority of each faith, which makes up over like 1 billion, almost 2 billion followers each religion. So I think that's a very good thing to keep in mind. And get to know some Muslims personally, if you know some colleagues, some neighbors, some friends, and ask them how they're doing. Maybe get together for some coffee or some, invite them over, or go visit them. I think that would be one of the wonderful things to do.
Awesome. So my last question is, are you free this weekend?
Actually, I have to work this weekend.
Oh, okay, it's okay. Another weekend. Everybody, Tamim Saidi.
Thank you, everybody.
Board member of the Islamic Resource Group.
Thank you very much.
Tonight, Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Raven.
Long and fruitful life.
I think we're all the same. We'll go the way we came. I think I've played this game. Our rules on a different name. I've looked for answers in the skies. I've shouted myself down 100 times. My cliched shirts can stay with me for the season, playing in the rain. I know we're all to blame for the way we've played this game. If I could just explain my addiction's truth or shame. Our choices feel to us. Our shapes will be undone. Our sin will burn and follow those leave behind me as the sunlight.
Sick. I'm gonna play one more song. It's brand new, brand spanking new. We're called Braver again. Everybody give it up for Minnesota Night. That was awesome. I've never seen like my friends do something quite like this, so that was really neat. Thank you all for being here. Here we go.
soldier as it crossed your mind. Near will when you hold on. Well, I promise it's crossed mine. My obsessive confessions are worn out and few. Maybe that's why I still haven't heard back from you. I've got a couple choices. I've got my inside voices too. How about you? How about what? Yeah, me too. Are you one for the cold and the sting of the rain? You've been locked out again and again and again. My obsessive confessions are worn out and few. Maybe that's why I still haven't heard back from you. You a slave, are you a soldier? Has it crossed your mind? Near will when you hold on. Well, I promise, yes, I promise, it's crossed mine. Our successive confessions are worn out and few. Maybe that's why I still haven't heard back from you. 'Cause my obsessive confessions are worn out and few. Maybe that's why I still haven't heard back from you.
Woo! We're braver. Thank you, everybody. This has been Minnesota Tonight.
Tune in, Minnesota Tonight. Tune in, Minnesota Tonight. Tune in, Minnesota Tonight. Tune in, Minnesota Tonight. Tune in, Minnesota. Tune in, Minnesota Tonight. Tune in, Minnesota Tonight. Tonight. Minnesota Tonight. Minnesota Tonight.